If you've ever looked at your labs and thought, well, nothing is flagged, so I guess I'm fine, this episode is for you because today I'm going to tell you about three labs from my own lab work that most standard checkups do not include. And these labs matter. They matter for inflammation, they matter for blood sugar, your blood vessels, and honestly, they help me understand why my body may have been working harder than it actually needed to for a long time. These three markers. You'll want to stick around and take some notes. Welcome to the Diabetes Maven, the podcast for women who are done feeling stuck and ready to take control of type 2 diabetes. I'm your host, Stephanie, a nurse practitioner and type 2 diabetic, and a woman on a mission to help you ditch diabetes for good. If you've ever felt frustrated by confusing advice, tired of the blood sugar roller coasters, and wondered if true healing is even possible, you're in the right place. Each week, we'll talk about what really moves the needle, from balancing your blood sugar, your metabolism, building healthy mindsets, and eating smarter, moving with purpose, and strengthening your faith along the way. Because managing diabetes isn't just about numbers. It's about freedom, energy, and living the life God designed for you, without complications. Subscribe to the Diabetes Maven wherever you listen to podcasts, and let's take this journey together. Hey there, and welcome back to Ditching Diabetes. I'm Stephanie, your host, and I will be talking about something that we started last week, but we're going to continue this week, and it's all about Function Health Labs. Now, this is not a sponsored podcast. I am not getting any money from Function Health. I just want to share my experience. We are going to be talking about nutrition labs. If you want to check out the previous podcast, I talked about endocrine labs to specifically look for. But this week, we're going to focus on the nutrition markers and how it affects how well your blood sugar is responding, how your cells are working, the inflammation in your body, and also the repair. I wanted to start here because I know this is where a lot of people get missed. You can have the standard lab panel that looks pretty normal. I know my A1C was normal and my blood sugar was normal. But when you start peeling back the layers and looking at everything else, you can see that there are some issues. And I want to talk about that today. Now, my actual numbers I'm going to share because I think there's real power in saying that this is not a case study. This is actually me, and it could be you. If you've ever had labs done from your doctor, which typically you should get them done every 3 months, but at least once a year, they're checking it comprehensive. And these labs that you get from the doctor, they're just not going to tell you these normal on the normal labs that your doctor will usually get every year. It's just not going to go deep enough. And sometimes on the surface, it can look totally fine. But when you start getting more and more labs to get more specific and understand how your cells are actually working, you might start seeing issues. Specifically, I'm going to focus on three labs today: the homocysteine, omega 3, and also vitamin D. There are a lot more nutritional labs we can go over, but for the purpose of this podcast, I think these were the most alarming for me. And so I wanted to start here. So my homocysteine, and I'll get into what each of these are. Because honestly, I really didn't know that, there was a homocysteine level and what it was for. But my homocysteine was 12.8, and my omega 3 was 2.6%, and my vitamin D was 58. Some of you might be already thinking that I don't have any idea what these mean. Perfect. That's why we're here today. I want to make this simple. Homocysteine is basically a marker that can tell us if your body is actually recycling certain nutrients, especially B vitamins, which is very interesting because I have been religiously taking certain vitamins for at least a year, maybe a little bit longer. When I first realized that, okay, my vitamin D levels were actually low, and plus I'm African American or part African American. So the more melanated skin you have, the harder it is going to be to get vitamin D from the sun. And so when my doctor ran all of these before, I started being intentional about using a multivitamin and making sure those B vitamins are in there. Not so much omega, but now since I have this lab, I actually started. Now, the omega 3 index tells us how much anti-inflammatory fats like EPA and DHA are built up in your red blood cells. And then finally, the third one, vitamin D, We all know vitamin D. We all think about our bones and how strong they are, right? But it really acts more of a hormone in our body. It affects your immune system, it affects your pancreas, your muscles, and how your body uses insulin. And here's the big idea for today. Blood sugar problems are not just simply blood sugar problems. They are cell problems. They are inflammation problems. They are blood vessel problems. Whole body is affected by all of these nutrients. So if we only talk about carbs or A1C or blood sugar and we never talk about the health of the cell, we are missing a huge part of the story. Now, the wins matter too. So before I get into what was off, I also want to say this, not everything was bad. My magnesium was great. RBCs looked solid. My ferritin was in range. My iron and all of that looked healthy. Zinc, calcium, and all of these things tells me that what I'm doing is doing in the right direction. So sometimes we look at labs immediately and spiral into everything that's wrong, but we also need to acknowledge where we're winning in some areas. There was a time when I was so severely anemic that seeing a healthy iron actually that mattered to me because I don't know, there was a time period shortly after I gave, well, my son was probably 2 or 3 at the time, and I started feeling faint and dizzy every time I stood up and not understanding, also having heavy cycles, but not putting two and two together. When I went to get that lab done, I was so low that it was kind of at the level of needing a transfusion. So I was surprised that I'm walking around here like this. So when I see that iron level, I know that taking my multivitamins, it's really helping me. And I'm really grateful for that. Now, we're going to focus on these three today because I think they deserve attention because most of us probably never heard of it. Your doctor's not checking for it. Maybe the vitamin D. They don't always check for vitamin D on a regular basis, but they might sometimes order that extra, especially if you're African American. Now, so let's just start with homocysteine. Homocysteine is actually the smoke alarm that most people never check. It sounds pretty complicated, but here's a simple version. Homocysteine is a substance your body makes when it breaks down protein, which is normal, right? We want to break down protein. You're supposed to make some homocysteine. The problem is when it builds up, okay? So you can think of homocysteine like a smoke in the kitchen. A little bit of smoke while you cook is not a disaster, but if the smoke keeps building and no one opens a window, now you have a problem. Your body has a system that's supposed to clear homocysteine and recycle it into useful things. That system needs three main B vitamins. You got B12, B6, and folate. Now, if one of those are low, or if your body does not process them well, homocysteine can rise. And my number was 12.8. Now, even though this is not a panic number, I did panic a little bit because it's higher than I actually want it to be. But in many functional medicine spaces, we like to see it under 10 and often closer to 7. Why do we care about this number in the first place? Who cares if homocysteine goes high? Well, homocysteine can irritate the inside lining of your blood vessels, okay, which we'll get into more of the heart values next week, but homocysteine will kind of overlap with that because I did I do talk a lot about complications and all of the complications that type 2 diabetes can come with. One of those complications is your cardiac system. And so when I hear the homocysteine levels high and it can affect the lining of my blood vessels, I know that I am in trouble. So I need to start doing something so I can start lowering this number. So that lining on the inside of your blood vessels is endothelium. You can think of it like a smooth Teflon coating inside of your arteries. Teflon is a nonstick that you use in your pan when you're cooking something. And when that lining gets injured or inflamed or sticky, it becomes easier for plaque and damage to develop over time. So if you have diabetes or prediabetes or some insulin resistance, high inflammation or high cholesterol particles, your blood vessels are already under more stress at baseline. So an elevated homocysteine can just be more fuel for the fire. Okay. What homocysteine has to do with blood sugar now, you may be wondering, okay, what does this have to do with diabetes? Well, it has to do a little bit with diabetes because already we're at a 2.5 times risk of cardiac issues, but it has a lot to do with your blood sugar. When your blood sugar runs high, it can also damage blood vessels. This is why diabetes affects the eyes, the kidneys, nerves, heart, and feet. We call these complications, but really they are blood vessels and nerve problems. Homocysteine can just to that stress because it is tied to inflammation, oxidative stress, and blood vessel irritation. Oxidative stress is basically rusting inside of your body. You may have heard, I know when I was in school, they pushed the CDC pushed this nutrition initiative where they want you to eat more fruit and vegetables because it's antioxidants, right? Those antioxidants will get rid of all that oxidative stress that's floating around your body. So when you have another cause for inflammation like homocysteine, then you're just adding to that problem. Of course, it's not actual rust, but the same idea. Too much damage, not enough repairs happening. Cells are inflamed and stressed, insulin already has a harder time doing its job. So it's just like a catch 22. Insulin, remember, is the hormone that helps move sugar from your blood into your cells so that they can work. And so if that cell is just not working properly, just think of a sick person, doesn't really work properly. You don't want to do anything. And that's what your cell is doing when it's inflamed. It's like the doorbell is broken. Insulin is standing outside, ringing the bell, knocking on the door, but the cell is just not responding well. That's what insulin resistance is. And this is why I want people to understand that blood sugar is not only about what you eat. Food matters, of course, and I think it is one of the most important things, but the health of the cell matters too. Without healthy cells, there's just a whole cascade of things that fall apart. A note that I want to mention about metformin that people need to understand that if you take metformin, which is commonly prescribed for diabetes, you need to ask your provider to check your B12 because it can affect your B12 levels. It actually makes it decrease. This happened to me. One day when I was prescribed metformin, I think after a month or two, I started having really sensitive, my whole mouth was sensitive. I couldn't even, I like spicy food. I couldn't even have a mildly spicy anything without it burning on the inside of my mouth. And also, it kind of tasted like metallic taste. I don't know, it was just weird. And so when I started doing research, low vitamin B level can cause all of this. So I talked to my doctor and we made some changes and it got better. So definitely, if you're on metformin, this is something that I don't think most providers, I'm not gonna say they don't know it, but maybe it's not on their radar because they're just like, oh, you're not having any symptoms of low B12. So why don't you you'll be fine. But I think that you should at least get it checked, especially if you've been on metformin for a while. Now, if your vitamin B12 has been low or borderline, you might have symptoms like numbness or tingling, burning feet, memory changes, or anemia. You can ask also whether that homocysteine should also be checked too. This is not me telling you to stop metformin at any rate. Please do not do that. Talk to your doctor first and get your labs checked and then go from there. Okay. Just know that long term metformin use is linked to lower B12 levels in some people, especially with higher doses and longer use. Okay. And B12 matters for nerves, red blood cells, energy, and homocysteine recycling. Now, so what actually supports healthy homocysteine? There are the big three that we just kind of talked about: B12, B6, and folate, which come from foods like spinach, romaine, arugula, all those leafy green vegetables, avocados, and beans. Now, B12 is going to come mostly from animal foods. So if you're vegan, you got to supplement that. So meat, fish, poultry, eggs, and dairy. And B6 is also found in poultry and fish, potatoes, chickpeas, and bananas. Now, when it comes to supplements, this is where I want you to talk with your provider, especially if you have the MTHFR variant, a history of cancer, or pregnant, or maybe you're on medications or you're sensitive to B vitamins. But in general, the form matters. Some people do better with methylated forms like methylfolate, methylcobalamin. So I recently, with these labs and seeing how my homocysteine level was high, and then started doing the research and seeing this MTHFR variant. Now, MTHFR is important. MTHFR variant, well, the MTHFR gene, I should start with that. It's very confusing, a little science nerdy here, but it basically helps convert folate into an active form. So, if you're taking folate and all these multivitamins, your body may not absorb it if you have a variant. Okay. And the only way to check this variant is to get a genetic test done. It can cost about $400. And if you look at the research, it'll say, most people do fine. You don't really have any problems. If you have a variant, it's not a huge deal. But when you start coupling it with a high homocysteine level, then you might have a problem because, again, homocysteine affects your heart, the blood vessels. So I have to really think about personally what I want to do if I want to go get tested. Now, I actually did a 23andMe a few years ago and it as I'm researching how to get this genetic test, I pulled up my results and I have a premium account anyway. And so it did show that I had the variant, which made sense. I was like, oh my gosh, I have been supplementing, especially something with vitamin B and of course vitamin D. I take B12 for a year now, and the fact that it's not a satisfactory amount was concerning. And so when I saw that I had the variant, now I just have to be careful about the supplements that I take because if you have the variant, you can't convert that folate and it's not going to get absorbed. So then you have the homocysteine level that goes really high and nothing is happening with the waste product. And so I found I already had the things in my cabinet that were going to work for me. So as of 3 weeks ago, I started taking these vitamins and I will recheck later to see how that level goes. But at any rate, when you get this level checked, again, you got to talk to your doctor for the homocysteine. It's not something that they routinely check. You want to make sure that they're checking for the homocysteine levels and folate, and then go from there. You have to kind of make an educated guess based on those labs if you have the variant or not, unless you want to get a genetic test. But again, if your homocysteine level's high, there's a sneaking suspicion because there are about 40 to 50% of people who have that variant. And we just don't know it because everything is typically fine. But then in the back of my mind, I'm just like, how many people are having heart attacks and we don't know their homocysteine level because no one's checking. Anyway, all right, now let's move on to omega 3. This was honestly the one that got my attention because I don't really take pills or anything, but my total was 2.6%. And for context, labs and omega 3 researchers consider 8% a higher or more protective range, and anything below 4% is considered low. And I was at 2.6%, which is pretty low. The omega 3 index looks at the amount of EPA and DHA in your blood cells, and these are long chain omega 3 fats that are found mostly in fatty fish and marine sources. And I want you to picture your cells for a second, okay? Every cell in your body has an outer layer called a membrane. And that membrane is not just a wall, it's kind of like a guard gate, permeable, lets things in, lets things out. It helps hormones communicate, like insulin. It helps the cell respond to the world around it. Insulin receptors sit in that cell membrane and a lot of other things. So the quality of that membrane actually matters. So if your cell membrane is healthy and flexible and signals just work better, but if your cell membrane is stiff and inflamed, built from less helpful fats, the signal can get messier. Okay, and that matters for insulin resistance, of course. Omega 3s will increase inflammation. Omega 3s are not magic, but they are one of the major tools in your body that your body uses to calm inflammation. And so, since mine were low, it suggests that my anti inflammatory tank was low too. So when I saw that my omega it was 2.6, it made more sense why my CRP level, which we'll get into next week, was very high. And it's gone up consistently for the last year. Now, it doesn't tell you exactly where your inflammation is coming from, but it does tell you that there's a fire going off in your body. Omega 3s help your body make compounds that resolve inflammation. So that word is important. Resolve. Inflammation is not always bad. You need a little bit of inflammation to heal, like a cut, when you fight infection, recover from an injury. The problem is when inflammation turns on and never fully turns off. That becomes more chronic. And chronic inflammation is a major driver of insulin resistance. It's also very hard on the blood vessels. And so for someone working with diabetes and prediabetes, cholesterol, heart risk, and all of that matters when it comes to omega 3. Now, the best food sources for EPA and DHA are fatty fish. Of course, we talked about that, like salmon, sardines, mackerel, herring, and anchovies. I think I might try my hand at anchovies finally. I mean, why not? I love Caesar salad, which has anchovies, so we'll see. And of course, sardines, which is a hard sell for most of us, but I'm going to try it for my health because, I mean, my health is worth it. So I might end up liking it. I've seen these restaurants pop up with anchovies and sardines, and they make them all kinds of different ways. But if your omega 3 index is very low, food and that may not be enough at first, honestly. And this is where the high quality fish oil tablets come in. And you don't just need one. Usually they're about 1,000 milligrams in each pill. So you're going to need 3 or 4 pills in a day. And you need to get high quality one. A lot of these supplement companies, they have a lot of fillers, so you just want to make sure. I prefer brands that are third party tested for purity because the fish oil quality can vary a lot. Now, on a safety note, just know that some omega 3 can thin your blood. So if you're on a blood thinner, please take precaution and always talk to your doctor. Okay. talk about vitamin D. Now, vitamin D is not just a bone vitamin. Remember, we talked this kind of like a hormone. Mine was 58, which on a standard lab report is usually considered in range. And many providers will look at that and say, oh, you're fine. But for metabolic health and immune health, inflammation, I personally want to see it higher. For me, I'm aiming closer to 60 to 80 range. That does not mean that everyone needs to chase that high vitamin D number, but for me, I definitely want to get it up because I have been supplementing this vitamin D religiously for a year, and the fact that it's barely within range is concerning for me. So 58 surprised me, right? So I thought, okay, I'm taking it. Why am I barely there? That's an important lesson. But taking the supplement always means your blood is going to be optimized, right? Your dose matters, absorption matters, consistency matters, body size, gut health, sun exposure, all of those things matter. And this is why, of course, testing matters. Now, why do we care so much about vitamin D in the first place? Well, vitamin D acts like a hormone in our bodies. Our body uses it in many tissues, including pancreas, our muscles, our immune system, and fat tissue. The pancreas matters because that's where beta cells live. That's where insulin comes from. And if beta cells are tired and inflamed and not working well, our blood sugar becomes harder to manage. Vitamin D also plays a role in inflammation. There's that word again, and how well cells respond to insulin. So when the vitamin D is low, some people may have more trouble with insulin resistance. Does the vitamin D supplement fix diabetes itself? Not necessarily, but I want to be very clear that if your vitamin D is low, you're also dealing with insulin resistance on a worse scale and inflammation. So it's definitely worth addressing. Now, where can you get this vitamin D? Again, we're back to fatty fish, egg yolks, liver, fortified foods. And for many people, food alone is not enough to raise that vitamin D level. Sunlight helps, but it also depends on where you live, what season, your skin tone, sunscreen use. In the real world, you might need supplementation. Now, vitamin D3 is usually the form used that's more readily absorbed by the body. Also paired with K12, or excuse me, K which is vitamin K. And this is something also to discuss with your doctor, especially if you're taking blood thinners. Remember, any supplement, always run it by your doctor. Now, vitamin D is fat soluble, which means that it's absorbed better with a meal. So I personally take it at night after dinner along with magnesium because vitamin D also helps magnesium be absorbed. And it's good for sleep. So I just take it together right after my dinner. Now, my magnesium looks great, so I'm not concerned about that. So I'm very pleased with that number. All right, so let's zoom out because this is where labs get powerful. Not one marker at one time tells a story together. My homocysteine was elevated, which points me towards vitamin D and methylation support. My omega-3 index was low, which tells me that my anti-inflammatory fat status is not where I want it to be. My vitamin D was close, but not quite where I want it to be for my metabolic goals. And so when I put these next to my CRP, the story gets a lot clearer. My body has been asking for more support, not a stricter meal plan, but support. And this is the important difference. So many people with diabetes or even pre-diabetes are told directly or indirectly that their body's failing because they're not disciplined enough or you didn't cut enough carbs. And I just hate that message for us. Yes, our food choices matter, movement matters, all of those things, but biology matters too. Nutrients matter. Inflammation matters. Medication can affect nutrient levels. Genetic can affect nutrient processing. And then, of course, you have your gut health, which can affect absorption. Sometimes the problem is not that you're trying hard enough. Sometimes the problem is that no one gave you a full map of what to do. And what I want you to really take away from this episode, first, I don't want you to panic order every supplement on the internet. You can go to Function Health where they're going to do 80 plus labs, okay? But that's not the point. The point is to get curious and ask more questions so that you can talk to your provider, say, hey, I'm really curious as to what my B12 or my folate or homocysteine might be. And this is especially important if you take metformin and have those symptoms like numbness. If you're vegan or you take medications that can affect these numbers. And also checking that vitamin D levels to see if you're in range, not just asking if it's normal, asking what's optimal for you based on your health history and your goals. And then finally, getting an omega-3 index that's useful, trying to understand how your inflammation, how high that is in your body, your triglyceride levels, and all of those things. Now, if you supplement, when should you retest? And you should just talk to your doctor. Typically, 90 days is a good marker, but they should definitely be a part of that conversation. You're going to test, support, and then retest so that you can get to that optimal level. Again, I'll put a plug in here for Function Health because they will tell you when to test at certain levels and they'll give you a food to avoid, food to enjoy, and then you can ask them provider questions if you want to. But that costs about $300 to $400. And if you don't have the ability to pay for that, you can talk to your doctor, get your doctor to order it so that insurance will pay for it. Because if there is, especially if you have diabetes, there's a reason to check these at least once. So today's big takeaway, all right, blood sugar is not just about sugar. It's about the health of your cell. It's about inflammation, how your vessels are doing, about your nutrients that your body needs to use insulin well and repair damage. We talked about homocysteine, omega-3, and vitamin D, which are not the labs most people hear about at a regular checkup, but they can tell a very important story about how our body is working. And sometimes that story is a missing piece. Next week, we're going to talk about labs that specifically affect our heart. And this is super important. That's really what got me thinking about all these labs because it all points to inflammation. We're going to talk about LDL, particle number, APOB and CRP, and why the standard cholesterol panel can look fine when an advanced panel tells a very different story. Thank you for joining me today. And if you have any questions, find me on social media. I'm everywhere on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. I would love to connect with you. If you have questions specifically about these supplements, leave a comment. Be sure to subscribe and share this episode with a friend. Thanks for listening to Ditching Diabetes with the Diabetes Maven. Share this episode with a friend and leave a review so more women can ditch diabetes for good. Grab all of your free guides and resources at thediabetesmaven.com, and I'll see you in the next episode. Stay well.